There is a truth that makes many people feel uneasy the moment they hear it. Human beings were not the first creatures to walk on Earth. Before Adam was created, before the first breath of humanity ever echoed, this planet already belonged to other lives. They were not shadows. They were not vague myths. They had communities, intelligence, freedom of choice, and a history longer than human memory. They lived here. Not in chaos, but in order. Not in darkness, but with a clear purpose: to know their Creator. Earth was not taken by force. It was granted as a gift. And the difference between being granted something and acting like you own it opened the first tragedy in cosmic history. For a very long time, everything stayed in its proper place. Worship existed. Order was preserved. But then a tiny thought, almost invisible, began to form inside a community that had lived too long, grown too strong, and become used to never being challenged. If we have been here for thousands of years, if we have built everything, if we are numerous enough, powerful enough, and knowledgeable enough, then is our right to exist on Earth still mercy? Or has it become something automatic? Downfall rarely begins with violence. It begins with reasoning, with statements that sound reasonable, with redefining right and wrong according to the interests of the strong. Injustice does not arrive like a storm. It slips in, gets legalized, gets covered by strength and the silence of the majority. And when warnings were delivered, they stopped listening. Not because they did not understand, but because they did not want to be reminded that their power had limits. Messengers were sent, not to take away, but to restore a truth that had been forgotten. Every form of power has a source. But those words were not welcomed. They were treated as a threat. And then, like a pattern repeated throughout history, the ones carrying the message were removed. Not because they were wrong, but because they spoke what the fallen did not want to hear. That was the moment the verdict came down, not as blind rage, but as a restoration of order. An army was sent, not to seize the earth, but to cleanse it from corruption that had crossed the limit. And the leader of that army was not a rebel, not a cursed being the way many people imagine. He was the embodiment of discipline, knowledge, and devotion, a name that will echo throughout this entire story: Azazil. Azazil won. Order was restored, earth was purified, and from that moment, history turned onto a path that very few could recognize at the time. Because the real danger is not during chaos. The real danger comes after victory, when evil has been defeated on the outside, but another seed begins to grow inside the heart of the one who won. Welcome to Prophetic History Explained. If you think this story is only about beings that vanished in the past, keep listening, because what comes next is not only about a community erased from Earth, but about a mistake that can repeat in any age, including ours. Some civilizations collapse because they lack strength, but other civilizations collapse because they believe they cannot be replaced. When power is no longer seen as responsibility but as identity, when long existence gets mistaken for immortality, and when human beings, or any created being, begins to believe they are here because they deserve it, not because they are allowed. If you want to understand why a being who once stood on the side of justice became humanity's most relentless enemy, if you want to know which moment pushed history onto its darkest road, then do not leave. The ending of this story does not only reveal Azazil's fate, it also forces a frightening question on each of us. What happens when someone who believes they cannot be wrong is given too much power? Subscribe to Prophetic History Explained to support us and walk with us into the next stories. Your support is what gives us the drive to keep uncovering forgotten chapters of history and truths that not everyone is ready to face. After order was restored, Earth no longer echoed with rebellion. The troublemakers were swept away, and the confusion that once covered the world gave way to silence. But inside that silence, a more dangerous phase began. Because when war ends, not every battle ends. Some battles are only beginning, silent, invisible, and fought deep inside the heart of the victor. At that time, Azazil was not a name people feared. He was a symbol of justice carried out. Proof that evil, no matter how far it spreads, is ultimately subdued by Allah's command. He did not win through cruelty, but through discipline, not through chaos, but through order. That is exactly why he was lifted to a position very few created beings ever reached. He was not only the one who carried out commands, he became the one who was trusted. His knowledge earned the angels' respect. His devotion made them listen. He taught, guided, explained realities beyond what many other beings could grasp. Wherever he appeared, order strengthened and worship was renewed. And slowly, nobody doubted that Azazil belonged among those very close to Allah. But that closeness began to mean something else. Not everyone who stands near light keeps humble eyes. When a being is raised high enough, praised long enough, recognized often enough, a dangerous question begins to form, even if it is never spoken out loud. Is this position a reward for who I am? Azazil did not stop worshiping. If anything, his worship grew deeper. But what changed was not his actions. What changed was how he saw himself. Instead of seeing himself as someone entrusted with responsibility, he began to treat that role as his identity. Instead of being a servant of the command, he began to treat his presence as something automatic within the order of the universe. This is the most dangerous trap of victory. When evil has been defeated on the outside, human beings or any created being can easily assume they have passed every test. They start believing that past righteousness guarantees the future. They start believing that someone who once stood on the right side will always stand on the right side. But in Allah's order, no position is permanent if the heart no longer examines itself. Azazil began living between two worlds, the heavenly realm and the earthly realm. He could be among the angels, and he could return to earth when needed. That power was not granted for domination, but for service. Yet that special freedom slowly became misunderstood. It stopped being seen as a heavy responsibility and started being treated as proof that he was different, higher, favored above other beings. The danger was not that Azazil thought he was capable. The danger was that he began to compare. He compared his understanding to others. He compared his worship to others. He compared his position to everyone beneath him. And in that comparison, a fragile boundary was crossed, the boundary between gratitude and self-importance. There was no thunder, no dramatic warning. Everything happened quietly. And that quiet is what makes it terrifying. Azazil did not realize that his greatest test would not come from rebels, but from the very role he had fulfilled too well. Some beings fail because they fight Allah, but other beings fail because they forget they are still only servants. And Azazil, through devotion stretched across many heavens, slowly lost the ability to see his own limits. He did not betray, not yet. He did not disobey, not yet. But the seed was already there. When a being begins to believe its presence is necessary for the order of the universe, disobedience becomes only a matter of time. The most dangerous part of this story is not what Azazil will do next. It is the truth that all of this happened while he was still worshiping, still teaching, still standing in a place others admired. And that is exactly why Azazil's coming fall is not only his tragedy. It is a warning for every being who believes their righteous past is enough to protect them from future failure. Some tragedies do not begin with a mistake. They begin with certainty, not the certainty of ignorance, but the certainty of someone who knows a great deal. And that is the most dangerous moment in any being's journey, when knowledge no longer comes with self-questioning. Azazil knew of the preserved tablet, Allah al-mahfuz. He did not only hear about it, he had read what was inscribed there. He knew that everything is decreed and that nothing happens outside Allah's knowledge. And within those lines was a warning that made the angels tremble. A being once very close to Allah would face wrath and be cast out of mercy. The angels did not understand. They did not know who it was, but they felt how serious that decree was. They were afraid, not because they believed themselves guiltless, but because they understood that being close to light does not mean being exempt from testing. So they went to Azazil. They asked him to pray. They asked him to intervene. They asked him to use his position to prevent that evil from happening. Azazil listened. He was not shocked. He did not panic. He did not doubt. Because the truth is, he had known about that decree for a long time. But through all that time, he never once asked whether the name being warned about could be his. He prayed. But that prayer did not rise from fear or humility. It rose from an assumption buried deep inside him. This disaster is not meant for me. Not because he claimed to be sinless, but because he believed what he had done was enough to place him beyond the possibility of being questioned. This was not an open challenge to Allah. This was something far more subtle, the arrogance of someone who can no longer imagine that he might be wrong. The arrogance of using past worship as proof that the present is safe. Azazil did not deny the decree. He did not reject the preserved tablet, but he placed himself outside it. And in that moment, an invisible boundary was crossed, the boundary between a servant who knows he is a servant and a being who begins to see himself as an exception. In Allah's order, there are no exceptions built on personal merit. But Azazil, through long closeness to the heavenly realm, slowly forgot that. His knowledge was not lacking, his faith was not shallow, but his self-examination had gone silent. Arrogance does not always appear as loud self-glorification. Sometimes it is simply a question that never gets asked. What if this is about me? When that question disappears, the road to collapse opens even before any act of disobedience happens. Azazil began to treat his position as something automatic. His presence in the heavenly realm no longer felt like a fragile mercy. It began to feel like a necessary part of the system. He did not say it out loud. He might not even have fully realized it. But deep inside, a new feeling formed. That if he were absent, this order would be lacking. And that is the root of every spiritual disaster, when a created being starts believing the universe needs him instead of realizing he exists only because the universe is held in order. No angel stood up to accuse Azazil. No rebuke was spoken at that moment, because the test had not arrived yet. Allah, who knows what is hidden inside created hearts, does not rush to judge. He allows what is buried to reveal itself over time, not to expose for spectacle, but so it becomes unmistakable. From this story, a deep lesson is carved into the order of creation. The danger is not that people can make mistakes, but that they begin to believe they have outgrown the ability to make mistakes. It is not a lack of worship that pushes a being to the edge. It is the confidence that worship is enough to protect him from every test. Azazil still stood very high, still respected, still heard. But in that very moment of apparent safety, he was closer than ever to the turning point that would shape his fate forever. When Allah declared that he would place a Khalifa on earth, that announcement was not only about creation, it was a test. Not a test for the being about to be created, but a test for the beings who had existed for a long time and believed they understood the universe's order. The angels listened and questioned, not in rebellion, but because their memory still carried what had happened on earth before. They had seen earlier communities fall, spill blood, and spread chaos. Their question came from concern for order, not from arrogance. And Allah answered with a short statement full of authority. He knows what they do not know. Azazil heard that declaration too, but his reaction was not like the angels. There was no concern for the greater order inside him, but a deep inner shake. Because if Earth would have a new Khalifa, then residence, stewardship, and the role he once carried would change. And for Azazil, that change was not a rearrangement of order. It felt like a direct challenge to a position he had grown used to calling his. At first he calmed himself. He assumed this new being would be like the angels, pure, radiant, obedient, and easily guided under his leadership. But as the act of creation was revealed, that thought began to fracture. The new being was not made from light and not from fire. He was made from earth, a substance Azazil saw as low, heavy, and easily broken down. When that form was placed before the created beings, Azazil examined it closely. There was no soul yet, no life, just a silent body, finite and fragile. He walked around it like a scholar analyzing an unfamiliar object. He searched for signs of superiority, signs of worthiness for the role of Khalifa, but what he saw only strengthened the conclusion forming inside him. This being could not be compared to him. What Azazil did not understand or did not want to understand was that the test was never about Adam's material qualities. It was about response to Allah's command. The universe is not built on material comparison, but on absolute obedience. And here, the final line was drawn. When the soul was breathed into that body, life appeared. Adam opened his eyes, sneezed, and met the world with innocence and haste. He saw what was beautiful and reached for it even before his body was fully ready. That weakness was not hidden. It was displayed openly before all. Then the command was given. No long explanation, no negotiation. Make sujud, not as worship of Adam, but as confirmation of an unchanging principle. All value comes from Allah's choice, not from a creature's evaluation. The angels bowed, not because they understood everything, but because they trusted. They had asked questions earlier, but when the command came, they did not cling to their reasoning. They obeyed, and that obedience protected them. Azazil did not. In that moment, everything that had been building inside him erupted. His knowledge, his past, his position, his comparisons all spoke at once. He did not deny Allah. He did not reject the existence of the command. But he placed his reasoning above it. He looked at Adam and saw only earth. He looked at himself and saw only fire. And from that comparison, he concluded the command was not fair. Not because he hated Adam, but because he could not accept that a fragile being would be given what he believed should belong to him. This was the decisive moment, not the moment Adam was honored, but the moment Azazil revealed what had been hidden for so long. The test was not aimed at humanity. It was aimed at a being who stood very high and believed he understood order better than the one who created him. Obedience, when it is demanded in the one place it wounds the ego most, becomes the final measure of faith, and Azazil did not pass. Azazil's refusal to bow was brief, but its consequences stretched to the end of time. There was no debate, no bargaining, no second attempt placed on the scale. In Allah's order, obedience is not something to negotiate, it is something to carry out. And when the command was rejected, the judgment came. Azazil was not punished for lacking belief. He was not condemned for denying Allah. What brought him down was choice, a fully aware choice, placing his own reasoning above the command of the one who had given him everything. And that choice reshaped his entire being. From that moment on, Azazil was no longer called by his old name. The title linked to knowledge and devotion was taken away. He was pushed out of the position he had come to treat as automatic. Not because Allah needed to prove authority, but because order cannot stand when a creature believes it has the right to judge the command of the Creator. Exile was not only a change of location, it was stripping away status, stripping away glow, stripping away even the beauty that once earned the angels' respect. What remained was not power, but the raw exposure of an ego deeply wounded. And in that condition, Azazil faced his final decisive moment. He could have repented. He could have bowed. He could have admitted he was wrong. But he did not. Instead of asking for forgiveness, he asked for delay. Not to repair what he broke, but to prove that Allah's choice was a mistake. He asked for time, not to return, but to drag others down with him. From that moment, his relationship with humanity was set. Not as equals in conflict, but as an enemy fueled by deep resentment. Human beings became his target, not because they were strong, but because they were chosen. Not because they were perfect, but because they were given a place he believed he should have kept. That hostility does not move through open violence. It moves through whispers, through twisting truth, through making wrong feel normal and making right feel uncomfortable. Shaitan does not come to command. He comes to suggest, not to force, but to tempt, not to attack head-on, but to loosen the foundation from within. The most frightening part is not how strong Shaitan is, but how well he understands human beings. He does not need to invent new evil. He only needs to exploit what is already there: haste, greed, fear of loss, and the hunger for approval. Every trap is wrapped in a layer of reason. Every wrong turn is presented as a small exception. Shaitan does not promise hell. He promises convenience. He does not call for rebellion, he calls for compromise. And through that chain of compromises that seem harmless, people slowly lose direction without noticing. Shaitan's greatest tragedy is not that he was expelled. It is that he knows he will never be forgiven, not because Allah refuses, but because he sealed that door from the inside. His hatred is not only aimed at humanity. It is aimed at the moment he realized there would be no way back. This story does not end with the fall of one being. It continues through every choice human beings make. Every time a person places personal reasoning above Allah's command. Every time a good past is used to excuse a wrong present. Every time obedience is treated like something negotiable. Azazil once stood very high. And because he stood so high, his fall became absolute. That fall is not a warning only for a cursed being. It is a warning for anyone who believes position, knowledge, or past deeds can protect them from failure. Because in Allah's order, nobody is measured by the past alone. Every moment is a new test, and the difference between the one who is raised and the one who is lowered can come down to one thing. Will they bow when the command goes directly against their ego? The deepest lesson here is that no spiritual position is immune to testing. No past is holy enough to guarantee the present. No achievement is great enough to make someone an exception from self-examination. Every moment is a new test, and every command that clashes with the ego is an opportunity to be raised or lowered. To apply this lesson today, each person needs to be more watchful over themselves than over others. The moment you start thinking, I am not like them, I am better than them, or this probably does not apply to me, that is the most dangerous moment. Humility is not self-hatred. Humility is leaving room for the possibility that you could be wrong. Obedience is not blindness. It is choosing to place truth above ego, even when that choice feels uncomfortable. In a world where people increasingly trust personal logic, subjective emotion, and the right to define right and wrong for themselves, this story lands like a quiet but severe warning. Drifting away from truth rarely begins with betrayal. It begins with excessive confidence in yourself. If you felt the depth of this story and want to keep exploring prophetic history, the hidden spiritual lessons behind major turning points in human life, join the Prophetic History Explained community so we can learn, reflect, and go deeper together. And do not forget to subscribe to Prophetic History Explained to support us in making more high-quality, thoughtful, meaningful videos. Your companionship is what allows untold stories to keep being told.